Welcome, my friends, to B2 Gaming. Today we're playing Ultimate General Civil War. The first battle of Bull Run will be the Confederates today. We're playing on the Major General difficulty, the most difficult setting for today's historical battle. You can see that the numbers are pretty even. However, we will be facing a huge and well-trained force compared to what we might be playing on other difficulties. Our good defensive position will be necessary. However, half of our army will be arriving late in the day, so at the midpoint of the battle we'll be heavily outnumbered. We're anchoring our right at the stone bridge. Our left is too wide to cover the entire river, so we'll position our first forces to arrive on Matthews Hill. The briefing is covering that our fallback position will be Henry Hill, and this is the final location we can fall back to, with reinforcements coming from the south in 2 waves. The Federals are demonstrating an attack, but they will be coming hard, so if we don't defend well, they will overrun this position. Right now, just 1,000 men and 5 guns defend it. Every 25 men equals a gun, so with 125 or less, that's 5 guns maximum. This is the direction the main Union force will be coming from, and we have no forces in the area presently. Matthews Hill will be where we fortify before they can arrive. Smart use of Clay's dragoons is key to this battle. It's the only cavalry force you will get early. The easier position to defend is the bridge, so I assigned the smaller 4th South Carolina to that, while moving the Tigers to guard the ford that the enemy may try to use, and before they can scout it, I'm sending Clay's dragoons across, both to spot what the Union is doing on that side of the river, and also potentially to attack vulnerable artillery. Ideally, the Union will send their infantry very close to the bridge and leave their artillery far back to take little counter-battery damage, but that will leave them without supporting infantry for a dragoon attack. Right now I've got the battle on normal speed, but as it gets intense, I will send it to slow speed, so that I can issue orders to everyone without needing to pause the game and break up the flow of the battle. I think this speed feels the most realistic, but to speed things up, sometimes we'll be in normal speed, and once we've gotten to the end and are just mopping up, we'll go to even faster speeds. They call the artillery king of battle, so most of my tactics involve taking out the enemy artillery, and so I target my artillery onto theirs, something I don't normally do, target any of my units, or specifically my artillery. When you target a unit, it can become locked on and ignore other threats nearby, so you generally want to leave the AI to decide what's the most threatening thing that needs to fire at. But there are times when you'll need to hold position or hold fire like I just did there, so that your unit finishes a maneuver before it opens fire. Also, reloading while moving takes out a lot of condition. That's your stamina, so low stamina men cannot fight effectively. So you want to stop, reload, and then move again in most circumstances. 4th South Carolina gets a very easy job standing behind the stone wall while the Tigers are maneuvering forward to get flanking shots and even fire across the river at the artillery since it moved far too close. If they stay far in the back, your dragoons can attack. If they get too close, they're in rifle range, and your artillery will do excellent damage at a middle range compared to long range. So as you can see, the Union artillery has already taken 20% casualties. Soon it'll lose one of its 4 guns as it goes 75 or lower, and then I'll target the other artillery to also try to cost it a gun. You'll notice that every type of terrain has its own cover, and that bridge type has the least cover of all. Bridges and fords have 1 to 5% cover. I forget exact amount, but compared to the open ground cover, it's nothing. And open ground is otherwise the lowest cover in the game. Here we're at a standoff, and though I'm whittling the artillery down pretty quickly, they still outnumber me enough that if they could get their men across in good condition and with good morale still, they would win the fight, the melee fight at the stone wall, at the ramparts there. The skirmishers form my backline reserve. If an enemy unit does enter melee, they'll be able to fire some close range volleys that will hopefully rout them before I can suffer too many casualties myself. B and Bartow's brigade, much larger but not very well trained brigades, are arriving to cover the left. Although they are relatively huge compared to what I have so far, they are heavily outnumbered by multiple 2,000 man, I believe 5 total 2,000 man brigades coming from the Union. Historically, I believe this was 2 divisions out of 5 of the Union force. The enemy comes at me, but I get the first volley, meaning I do a lot of morale damage, meaning I'm now fighting someone with lower condition and lower morale. And then once they rout, they're basically not offering any resistance at all, they're just trying to get away. And so once I charge in, they give up, decide that almost 50% casualties is enough. And this opens up the rear. With no cavalry to guard their rear, I'm able to cross the creek and begin to harass any supplies or reinforcements they might have. Also might try even getting into pistol range. So if I get an actual melee, those infantry will turn around and gun me down very quickly. The key here is that road and that house are along the hill, so you want to put your men along the ridge of that hill so that they get the height advantage. Anyone charging up to them will lose a lot more condition. Their firing will be less accurate comparatively. At this point, I decided the 4th Carolina has taken too many hits, lost too much morale and men, and so we're trying a very efficient trade where they pull back without taking any fire. The fallback is the best thing to press, as you don't turn your back to the enemy, but you still move back very quickly. decide to merge up the men rather than keep them separate. And so now the entire 1st Division that I started with, 2 brigades of the 1st Division, are together on that rampart. Just now entering is another 1st Division unit, Hampton. All of your men are using the 1855 rifle, which has good accuracy and reload. Not great, but good, but poor melee. So only some of the reserve units that have the Springfield 1842 have a really good weapon for melee. Yeah, here I feel like I had some kind of bad luck, because normally that wouldn't have happened, where a single unit charges across and routs you. But the larger units can be a bit ineffective, so perhaps by going to the larger unit, I cost myself some of the effectiveness there. Luckily, the artillery is still able to provide some flanking fire. It's not crucial to hold this hill, but I'm not used to losing it so quickly. Usually it's not until Keyes arrives with his much larger brigade that I lose it. But Hampton has arrived to potentially retake the position, so I decide to give a little bit more battle before pulling across the creek. As you can see, maneuvers can take a very long time. The cavalry from up north has joined the battle in the south, and this puts me in a very tough position. With nothing in place to save my artillery, I put my general in, and perhaps the AI thinks it's a saber cavalry because it runs away. But definitely had a good opportunity to take out a general and some artillery if he had charged in. The cavalry make me decide to fully abandon this side of the river. I'll lose too much condition, too much stamina on Hampton if I run him across to try to fight that cavalry and the infantry that will be crossing the bridge. So I decide that I can give up that hill, and the advantage will be that it'll probably allow my cavalry to attack their rear and take out an artillery or two. An artillery battery or two. Hopefully all of the artillery that they presently have there. Right now the defense is looking a little bare bones. I've got 2 brigades at Henry Hill and 2 brigades at the Matthews Hill. 1 artillery on Henry, 2 artillery on Matthews. But we've identified 3 Union brigades to the south, and now 3 to the north. 1 isn't visualized yet, but you could see it behind on the left. Sometimes you'll see the dot on the mini-map before you visually can see the unit on screen. However, we've just routed 1 of the 3 infantry brigades up here, so it looks like the defense up here is holding well. However, we didn't block off the cavalry from coming to the south. So at the end, we were a little overwhelmed in the south because Hampton's Legion didn't arrive in time. After the canister fire, however, the Union wasn't very quick in taking the flag, so that's going to give us some more time to do damage up north, because after they take the flag, they get a cooldown, and then after the cooldown, if they still hold the flag, they'll move to the next phase of the battle, which is Jackson arriving with his reinforcements. You can see I maneuver B and Bartow to get some fire in on these skirmishers, quickly whittling and, if possible, destroying the skirmisher units, especially on the Union side, will make the battle go much easier the Union side, because they're less effective in melee, so their skirmishers largely affect their performance much more so than Confederate skirmishers. They need their skirmishers to both deal a lot of casualties and to screen for their infantry units, which can't take a lot of hits before their morale drops low. So when you destroy those skirmishers, then what that does is make sure that they can't screen the Union main force and make them much, much more effective. One of the most effective defenses I've had on Matthews Hill, which makes it unfortunate that the stone bridge was taken so quickly. Could have done a lot more damage out here, but the longer you stay, the more chance you'll get outflanked, and the unit that's to the left there and getting outflanked will take a lot of casualties or even potentially get captured. It's much easier to capture a unit when you surround it, so you want to be very careful when a unit is flanking you, or especially if you're worried that a unit might come from your rear. You generally want to withdraw before that can happen. Even a skirmisher at your rear can basically insta-rout you with a single volley. But their capture of the stone bridge has brought my reinforcements a little faster, and while it's necessary that I withdraw now from Matthews Hill before their reinforcements come in and make my situation completely untenable, and also to form up the left flank on Henry Hill. What I had on the stone bridge will form up the center. Most of Jackson's Virginians will form the Confederate right, and then this retreating force will be my left, or potentially part of the center. Can't quite remember where it ends up. But you get 5 brigades. They're smaller from Jackson, but so that lets them cover a lot of area. I decide to turn it into 3 small brigades and 1 large brigade by merging 2 of them together. The smaller brigades rush forward to fill the gaps, while the larger brigade will become the reserve. Let's see those first Virginian brigades guarding the rightmost ford there on the Bull Run Creek, or the tributary creek. I'm keeping my men in relatively good cover. The cover of 59%. As you can see, when they're totally in the open, it's 24%. So cover of 50% and above is good for infantry. You want to be 75 or above for skirmishers because they have fewer men and they get cover bonuses. See, I'm setting my rifle range to be just at or in the middle of the creek, so that if the Union wants to fight me, they have to accept very poor cover to do so. They either have to run across the creek or fight within the creek. Either one will let me get a lot of casualties on them. Force a lot of casualties onto them, I should say. As you can see here, the Indiana cavalry falls for it, and they're stuck in the creek crossing and can't decide whether to get closer and try to continue the charge or fall back. 1st Ohio and its companion brigade are stuck in the ford. You move much faster in a ford. It's like 10 to 20% versus 5% some crossing elsewhere in the creek, because you can't cross a river. The deep blue you can't cross, the light blue you can cross, and then where you see the rocks, that's the ford. The flank has progressed pretty slowly, so I'm still hanging on at Matthews Hill, but I need to withdraw soon, or the Stonebridge force might outflank my force consisting of Hampton's Legion on the left, as the next cavalry is trying to do. And you need to clear an area quickly. The withdraw button is the best, but it's dangerous because if you lose track of B before you cancel that withdraw, he will withdraw all the way off the map and you'll lose him for this battle, as if he'd been captured. So while withdrawing is good, you definitely want to cancel the withdraw as soon as you can so you don't regret it. I've taken a watchtower, a space of high ground that gives you vision of the surrounding area with my skirmishers, and I can see that right now my left is wide open, no enemies, and so I can concentrate Jackson on the right. And at this point it has come to pass that there's no enemy defending their artillery, so it's time to go across and take that out. After first using the buildings, I'm now using the forest as cover to enact a fighting withdrawal. One of the flanking units, we see why the flank was so weak, one of the flanking units bypassed the hill and went straight to Henry Hill. Clay's dragoons attacked a little too late. They caught the reinforcing artillery, but Sherman caught them on the bridge. And so Clay's dragoons don't do nearly as much for me in this battle as they do in most battles. Usually they take out those 2 artillery units. But today it'll have to be the infantry. Jackson has routed the enemy infantry completely from the area, and so it has opened up a counterattack. Granted, it'll be across the creek, which will slow me down, but looks like they're weakened enough that I can make it. With the Ohio and New York brigades in retreat, that has left Keyes free to try to cross at the other ford, where he may end up routing one of my artillery if he can maintain his morale. With one brigade already crossing, I decide it's time to officially get everything else I can across. Because I've gotten too disjointed, I need to form a solid line. Their cavalry is causing me problems. Hurt one of my artilleries. Could have potentially killed both of those artilleries if I hadn't had some covering fire from Hampton's Legion. And so Keyes does get a solid hit on the Lynchburg unit, on Lynchburg's commanded artillery. But they're taking sustained and accurate fire, and so they won't last very long. With the reserve moving in to plug that gap, Keyes should be forced back since he doesn't have any support on either flank. Bartel routed or withdrew with full ammo and full condition, and so he's in an excellent position to attack an enemy he happens to be nearby. I went over the disadvantage of withdrawing. The advantage of withdrawing is that you don't lose condition when you're withdrawing. Makes it a little bit broken, but the fact that you can potentially lose the unit off the edge of the map means that it's something you don't want to abuse. You eventually might pay for it. With Sherman arriving, it makes it too difficult to cross over the creek and retake the stone bridge at this time, but that's usually my tactic. Let the enemy exhaust themselves and then counterattack on their left, my right. But yet usually they end up strongest in the center or on the Confederate left, the point where they're crossing and they have a building to take cover in on their side of the fords. I even pushed in Stuart's cavalry to cover that gap where Keyes was doing damage, and we finally stem him, and our left from Matthews Hill finally arrives and starts taking up position. As you can see by the bar at the top, at this point we are heavily outnumbered. Although not all of their units are engaged, most of them are nearing the line of contact, and so very soon I'll have to be prepared for a large assault, potentially at multiple angles, but even if it's only at one angle, it might overwhelm that spot and have a potential of making it to the flag at Henry Hill. At this point I feel like my biggest danger is on my left. I hardly have any forces over there, so Stuart, the fast response force, goes over and dismounts to get better cover. Skirmishers get the best cover bonus, followed by infantry, followed by cavalry, and last is artillery, which is why the cover promotion can be so important for an artillery. It gives them much more cover than other artillery units comparable to the infantry. Sometimes you have to shift a unit because it won't fire at a routing unit, but while it's trying to maneuver, it will shoot any unit that crosses its cone of fire. You can see the outline of the cone of fire whenever you select a unit, showing the range and angle at which it can engage its enemies. So Stuart is very effective in cover, although cavalry have less range weapons, so you want to get them generally in closer range than you would an equivalent infantry or skirmisher to maximize its effectiveness. But at this point I just want it to form part of the line rather than do a lot of damage. I'll be maneuvering more infantry out in this direction. Right now I only have 2 infantry brigades to fight 3, so I'll pull Jackson or another force in that direction and reinforce while having the other units in this area cover the line as best they can. Looks like I'll finally be able to finish off this cavalry unit that's taken more than 50% casualties. They'll usually rout at around 40-30%. Sometimes a unit can even get to like 15-20% if it's got good morale before it shatters or surrenders, that is. If this were a campaign, I might keep the artillery a little further back so that they suffered less casualties, but I've put the artillery in these historical battles into the most effective range where they cannot be hit. So it'll generally be right behind or beside the frontline unit that it's supporting. But I'd have it probably twice as far back as this artillery is from the infantry. If it was a campaign and I wanted to preserve the numbers, have them take hopefully 0 casualties. They're maneuvering for the rightmost fort again. Keyes has come back for more. Sherman is still recovering from his last attempt. However, I'm starting to get this leftmost ford. They're attacking the right and leftmost ford, probably thinking that's pretty clever. But I'm getting in position to have a solid line on the right and even a quarter of an encirclement here on the left, where they're taking a huge amount of fire. Skirmishers can hold the line temporarily, but they have such low numbers that if these skirmishers continue to hold the line, they'll wind up being shattered or maybe charged and captured. Usually a skirmisher can get away from an infantry, but if their condition is low or the infantry charges from close enough, they'll be able to close in and melee, and a skirmisher in melee is as good as gone. It'll shatter or rout. So doing some housekeeping on the right so that I force the enemy into the worst possible position where they're having no cover at all crossing the creek, whereas I have some cover in the trees. But in this case I also want to be a bit forward of the trees so that I get the more damage that you get when firing from the open compared to cover like trees or cornfields. I'm moving to encircle this conglomeration of units more so that I can get the flanking fire and drive them back across. Sometimes a unit will glitch out on a creek and will just stay there so that you can destroy them. And it might not be as glitchy as it seems, because I could imagine in real life a unit thinking that it had some cover when it's in the water, and the bullets have to hit the water first before it can hit them, whereas if they leave the water they're completely in the open. So a unit of men might decide to stay in the water rather than climb out and get shredded even more. Poor Keyes here is in the worst position his entire length along the creek. But this is the situation I forced upon the Union with my positioning. Yeah, they have to cross elsewhere, or they have to take fire while they're in the creek. But while the Union have incredible numbers in this battle, the disadvantage that they are facing is that their units are very green. They have low stamina, they have low accuracy, despite having fairly accurate weapons. So that when you fight them, rout them, they lose condition running back, and they lose condition returning to the line of contact. It causes them to be forced to attack piecemeal because so many of their units are recovering condition and or morale, and will be useless if sent in too early. You're seeing that here where the back units are too weakened to be significantly useful. Turning on the hold fire to get more effective fire. You don't want to hold fire too long though, because they may get their shot in first. And if they do, then your morale will suffer, and your accuracy is a combination of your firearms skill and how good your condition and morale stats are at that time of your firing. So you want to fire first, sometimes even if it's further away. And you want to weaken an enemy that you have to move in on so his fire becomes less accurate, less regular, less continuous. But yep, this kind of right-angled hook is the formation you want to create in this map to follow the terrain of the hill and the creek. While I was concentrated on the right, now I'm shifting left as their attack also is. Cavalry can be the best force to respond to a quick threat. One of the things it's doing there is the AI will always attack, maybe not always, but usually attack the closest target. So by running your cavalry across, assuming it's not destroyed, the infantry will track it, and while tracking it, it will expose its flank to the infantry that were at its front. And so 100-man cavalry that could have had no effect on the battle if it charged the infantry can rout that infantry by turning its facing to a beneficial angle. I've got that artillery on hold fire because its condition had gotten so low with how much it had moved and turned. A unit at 10% condition is not even going to fire very effectively, so you want to give them some conditions so that they'll fire more effectively and reload more quickly. Obviously, any fire is good if the enemy is at point-blank range, but if they're not at point-blank range, hold your fire in certain situations and regain condition, and then your fire will be more effective once you unhold fire or once they close in. And when you enter melee, hold fire is automatically cancelled, and there is no more effective fire than that point-blank fire while you're in melee. The battle's going very well, and at some point in the near future I'll probably turn it off of the slowest speed so that we can get to the end of this fight. I've already got the battle pretty well under control even before the final phase where Johnston arrives with the Shenandoah Valley Army. The Union had split into two, and its secondary, smaller force was supposed to be pressing and holding Johnston But since they failed to do so, the Confederates used the railroad to transfer that entire army, essentially, to fight the larger Union force moving on Richmond and trying to cross Bull Run. The Union tended to name things after rivers, which was the main feature for them. They sent their logistics across rivers, whereas the Confederates named battles after towns. Confederates called this battle Manassas. When it came to Antietam, which was the creek, the Confederates named it Sharpsburg, which was the town they fought at. So a bit of a different thinking. The Confederates' logistics was based on wagons, which brought the supplies to a town where it was put into a depot, whereas with the Union, put their supplies onto riverboats, moved it to the town that was the river port, and so the armies operated along rivers more so than roads and towns for the Union, and this affected the naming of their armies and their tactical thinking. Their big obstacles were rivers, as they were on the offense, and for the Confederates, their defense was the river, and they were defending along the rivers to protect the towns. Yet we've moved up the speed, and so you'll see the firing has changed. The movement speed of the skirmishers especially is more noticeably quicker. But now we get our final reinforcements, and suddenly the bar at the top should change to in our favor. They think that I should attack their right, but I generally attack their left. Usually we'll send some of the force to their right, mainly as holding force. In this case, that's what I'm doing. My reinforcements will arrive on their flank and should push them across the creek. Meanwhile, it would be quicker for me to advance on the right, retake defensive position at Stone's Bridge, and then push them on all their flanks, follow that road, retake Matthews Hill even, potentially. They've reorganized and are attacking again on the right, which is the area I weakened to hold on the left, so they've actually got a chance now. But these reduced units, with such small numbers, dealing a full volley of casualties to them will usually rout them. A larger unit can resist a single volley more in terms of morale, taking fewer morale losses. But just like with condition, 50% tired, 25% exhausted, I'd say it's pretty similar. 50% is about where you waver, 25% is about where you rout, and if you were to withdraw a unit and you wanted to stop them, their morale must be at least 17%. I don't know why that number, but it must be at least 17%, or when you try to stop it, it'll continue routing away until its morale has recovered on its own. And that's another advantage of withdrawing a unit. In addition to it moving faster and not losing condition, it makes it possible to stop the unit more quickly. If it routes on its own, it'll only unroute at, I don't know, 30-40% morale. But if you were to withdraw it, and then it took morale damage to 0 potentially, but then came back to 17, you could stop it at that point, and it would stop and recover in that position. So seeing a unit that's about to rout and withdrawing it first can leave you in a much better position defensively, because it doesn't have to travel as far to rejoin the line. Smith has come in, and being a bit isolated, I decided to pull him back, but he's pulled the Union further away from the flag, and so even though he didn't drive them back, he's pushing them further away from the objective, so in my mind that's just as good. I'm organizing the attack on the right flank that will push them back. I don't need to do anything more than hold, but by pressing them on the attack, it will alleviate the pressure on my center, which is arguably where I'm weakest right now. Most of the units that have taken most of the casualty and been in the fight the longest are there in the center. Two of the four brigades have been pushed across the creek, and now I'm in position to overwhelm these last two brigades. Now both Keyes and Sherman are in that same spot of the river, just getting torn apart. It can be very effective to concentrate a unit like they had done. You can double up their fire, but then if you don't control that unit the way the AI doesn't, Sherman would just marched across the creek because he wanted to get in a position where he wasn't overlapping with Keyes, and so instead of firing, he just casually walked across the creek under fire, and so now both units have entered the under 50% morale, and when you're under 50%, rather than the continuous volley like you're seeing right now from Bartow, they fire a ragged volley. You can see that in the bottom of the screen. You see that happening to Keyes and Sherman, where occasionally a few men will fire their muskets, but most of the men are wavering, they're unable to fire, they're falling back, they're cowering rather than reloading. And so when the unit is flashing, they're officially routing. When they've just gone shaded, they turn from blue to shaded white blue. That shows you that they're wavering, they're near to routing. And as our attack goes in on the Union left, we've opened up a path to their artillery, and that size of battery has no hope of holding infantry on their own. So the beginning of the drive to clear the Union has begun. There's really not much more tactical sophistication to the battle than this, so I think I'm about to jump forward. You can see basically I'll just be pressing the enemy as they rout, mopping up, not that exciting. So let me find the spot and I'll jump forward to the end of the battle. Yep, they've got some big units left, but most of their original units are about to shatter. First Ohio, there it goes. forward. Jump forward, you can see the right flank attack pressed all the way to Matthews Hill. Just chasing routing units, nothing exciting. But we've run out the clock. And so here comes the victory. Were this not streamed, I would continue on to kill or rout them all, but we'll just go to the victory. We're out of 20,000 men each. I lost 2,500, and they lost almost 13,000, more so when you include the captured. Bartow and B did most of the damage, but you can see infantry, infantry, infantry. Stuart being a very effective force there. And then 500, almost 50 to 1 casualties for Stannard, maybe a little more. We show our officers, one dead man, Mr. Sloan, and then what we captured. And that about sums it up. Jackson, Beauregard, and Johnston smashed the Union, even more so than they did historically. So, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a good day.